My name's Steve Smith, and I'm the pastor or lead pastor for revitalisation here at Bethesda in Ipswich, which is a role that comes alongside the church to help stimulate new growth through connecting in three ways. Firstly, reconnecting with God in the gospel by faith, with each other, and seeking to, particularly post-COVID, be good at looking after each other and caring for each other and connecting across the congregation. But then thirdly, connecting with our wider society. So that's the whole process that we're going through as a church at the moment.
Right, my name's Linda Green. I'm a member at Bethesda Baptist Church and a deacon, and I'm quite involved with lots of different little things that go on throughout the church life. And recently, I have been looking at the work of the women that we can work with in the church for evangelism and regaining new friendships that we've had in the past, and connecting with them, and in different activities that we hope to do in the future. Steve, within his role, had connected us with Nay, and have generally sort of talked around working alongside the women in the church. And this was one of the ideas that came up. And so we invited Nay to come, and we had a kind of like a mini little conference day with her. And from there, it encouraged us to actually hold the event. And whilst we've done women's events in the past for many years, we felt that we were encouraged to be more bold and try to be more effective in the gospel, in making sure that people knew what we stood for and why we were holding these events. So that's basically what happened. And we had a lovely afternoon. There were not many of us, but we had people come that wouldn't normally take part within a group, and so that's we sort of look to the future for that, because we feel like we could maybe get some people on board that wouldn't have been used to doing that, in the past.
So completely want to back up what Linda's just said, but actually say it began with a cup of tea when we chatted a little bit. Linda, about your heart, along with
Yes,
others, to be speaking more about Jesus and
yes.
finding your voice a bit. And that had been an historic question as to how to do that. And there'd been a frustration amongst previous sort of efforts as to how to actually cross that line in a way that was personal, real, and relationally sort of true to who we are. So that's why I connected with Nay through Anna Price, mainly because I knew that's a key area that Passion for Evangelism had been focusing on. So it was a really good sort of marriage of sort of passion at this end and equipping at your end, really, to get just some new energy going. There was nothing about the event that was particularly different to what's been done historically, apart from the fact that it was more on the front foot, Linda, wasn't it?
We've worked over a number of years and had so many different events for women. It was a bi-monthly thing that we did, and we just the term used to keep being used that it was a bridge building exercise to get to know these ladies and to eventually try and encourage them to come to church. But while doing that, we weren't really sort of being intentional on the actual event, to actually say the gospel there, because at the end of the day, like I used to say, well, how long does this bridge have to be before we actually see any kind of any glimmer of people wanting to, to know more. And so that I think that was my heart, that I wanted to. I felt like I didn't want to waste any more opportunities. That we had to be more intentional. Well, I think the training event was basically Nay. She said to us not to beat ourselves up. Basically, I think we were kind of uh, we were trying to be a little bit more chilled about it all. Do you know what I mean? And it felt very doable after we discussed what we did. We just kind of think that was going to be more of a natural process, and it enabled us to get on board with the stuff that we already knew, because we've done things before. We knew how to plan, and just hand it over to God to say, look, we need this to be, we want this to be God honouring, and we want it to be a place where people learn about Jesus. So that was what we learned from that day, and we announced it in church that we were going to actually be having this event. Some people came on board with it by inviting their friends who don't do church. But in particular, we had a member of the church who came to us and gave us a substantial donation to use towards the event, which meant that we could hold the event. And I don't know whether you know about these wreath making events, but they are quite expensive. You can really spend a lot of money. And we were able to do the event, so the ladies only paid £5 each. And it became a little bit of a talking point amongst the ladies. How have you been able to do this? And we were just able to say, well, someone from church has very kindly given us a donation in order to do this. So I think that in itself, spoke about where we are at church, and how some people do want to move forward. And we found that quite an encouragement that, they even did that for us. Sheila and I, we just generally sort of planned the afternoon, and we planned what we wanted to have within that. So we ordered things like the practical things, serviettes, paper plates, organised sausage rolls and mince pies and that kind of thing. Got people to make those. We managed to get hold of a really nice track, Christmas track, that gave the Christmas message, that had a lovely prayer inside. We gave everybody one of those. We gave them all a chocolate, and we set it all out. So we had all that planned, and then after that, we then had to go about finding everything to use for the actual event. We booked a speaker, a lady that we knew, and we were able to ask a friend of the church who used to be in membership at the church but isn't now, but a friend of the church. She came, and we asked her to come and actually show us how to make the wreath. So we sort of had everybody on board initially, right from the very beginning, and then we had to sort of get all the material together. And please don't ask me to go and find any more greenery. I don't want to see any more for quite a while. It was quite a job, but that was quite rewarding in the end. One of the highlights for me was we had about 10 ladies, we had 24 ladies altogether making the wreaths. And I think there was 10 of them that don't attend church or at all. So we're really pleased about that. And 3 of those were ladies that we used to have come to our female co. meetings when we had the ladies' meetings, and they were their take on it was, oh, this is just like, when we used to meet. So that was nice. So we want to try and really kind of for the future keep in touch with them. The actual afternoon, they all arrived and they had a glass of mulled wine and a mulled punch, I should say, and then we had the message, the talk first, and because we thought that if in doing that, then it gave up the people an opportunity to chat about what they'd heard during the afternoon. I'm not really sure that anything was chatted about, but we wanted to give that opportunity. Liz gave a lovely talk, and it was just pitched just right. We were very pleased, and within that was very much the gospel and the real meaning of Christmas. She talked about celebrations, and then the ladies carried on and started making the wreaths, and we broke halfway through, had tea, coffee, mince pie, sausage rolls, and then they finished off, and that's how they. And so we ran it from 2:30 till it went on past 5 o'clock, 5:15, something like that. Just a very practical thing for us is that we've said, Sheila and I both said, we need to have more people on board to spread the load, kind of thing. It was, quite the week leading up to it. It was just this jolly greenery. It was quite a big thing, and it took up a lot of time. Some people in the church were very good. We've got a couple of people who are farmers, and they brought us loads of greenery in, which was, very nice. We had people helping us with that, but it all had to be cut, and it all had to be a certain size and all this kind of thing. So there was quite a lot of stuff to do. So yes, we'd probably, practically speaking, we'd want to have more people.
Also, I think the planning question, I think it felt like we were getting going again in having not done these things for a while. And I think when you're doing that, it's hard to think beyond the first thing. So this is very much a confidence builder for the next things that we'd want to do. And I think one of the things that you said, Linda, that really struck me is that you'd forgotten the feeling of running a brilliant event and just how people felt after it. And the real desire is for that feeling to catch. That sort of to regain a confidence in God, a confidence in, we can do this and we can do it well. And we can do it better, but we can do it well. And so that sort of planning with confidence, I think, is you sort of build as you go, don't you? I think also that we want this sort of culture to catch. So we've got it in another ministry going on at the moment with we have a cafe called the Key Cafe, where they're having Christmas meals at the moment, and all the regulars that come to that have signed up to have a meal and to receive a gospel talk as well. And so there is a culture of this, but it's getting that catching throughout the year, not just at the sort of the big seasonal moments, but helping people see, having that culture of speaking about Jesus in our day-to-day lives. So once we get that catching, it means that people can view their week as a week to speak about Jesus rather than a season to speak about Jesus. And I think that's what we're longing for, and that's what we're praying for. So I think we're learning also about prayer. I think that there's been strong prayer going into this, and we do meet as a church to pray regularly for our outreach, for our evangelism, for our confidence to speak about Christ, just enjoying Jesus. And I think that's been one of the things of the last season of this year, really, is actually been learning to enjoy drawing close to Jesus for ourselves, because then we're able to speak naturally from our hearts and from our souls as the people we are about the Christ that we love. And that, for me, is the foundational issue that we always need to be coming back to, that there's just no point running an event if you don't actually love the person you're talking about. So it's sort of regaining our love for Christ is a really big thing that we regain that not just by focusing on him and hearing him in his word, but also being obedient to be sharing the gospel. And then we sort of grow in a love for him as we do that, as well as we have fellowship together and we learn. I think one of the joys of this initiative particularly is resourcing women to be proactive and getting on with the work in a way that churches can often neglect. And that's what I love about this ministry. That's what I love about the encouragement that they brought, is that the majority of so many people in the church have different ministries, and it's a real delight to want to see more men and women of all ages and stages, young children or no children, however it is, to be joining in. And the intergenerational elements are really important for this. It is worth saying, actually, that we had one bloke come, and we had another bloke that would have come if he knew it wasn't a female-only event. So there's a question around, actually, what culture are we now in that having men only and women only, or focused on how do we not be exclusive, whilst opening the opportunities to sort of couples to want to join in. So that was that's a lesson for us to be taking away. And
for future, it's sort of I think people have just sat back a bit because they feel like they can't do things, or they've run out of energy, or or whatever the reason is. You want to recapture that thing again, about yes, we can, and it doesn't have to be a hard thing. It can be, because to be honest, the wreath making event wasn't a hard thing to do and to sort out. It was just tiring because of the amount of stuff that had to be done, but it wasn't a hard event to organise. And so we want to recapture that again, with more women in the church, or whoever who feels that that they want to move forward and tell people about Jesus. And that's I think that's the thing that's been speaking to me, especially since Steve has been with us, that the revitalization, it's not going to happen by just sitting there and watching. You need to sort of muscle in, kind of thing, do things. and it's taught me to sort of probably to be a bit more brave, because it's so very easy to sit back and be afraid of saying things because you don't want to offend, or you don't know where, how people are going to react. But I think, well, people will talk endlessly about all sorts of things in their lives, so why shouldn't I do the same?